Hello everyone! Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Saltwell Safari Park. In today's episode, we are going to be finishing off the farm here at Saltwell Safari Park. And I'm going to dive straight into the speed build because there's not really anything else to say apart from, remember a while ago we had Indian peafowl here? Well, they overbred and it became a nightmare, so I got rid of them all. They're now going to be moving to this farm as well. So we're going to build a nice little farmland, basically. We're going to use some of the new conservation pack items again. We're going to be bringing in some tomato plants, carrots, pumpkins, and a few other bits and pieces. I've also tried to create something closely resembling wheat, but we don't really have anything like that. So I've ended up using the common reeds again, just to fill out the rest of this farm and make it look like this fully functioning workplace. That'll include our Przewalski's horses and our llamas and now our Indian peafowl. So it was really simple here, just using mulch to create like a little bed for these things, and then obviously we're going to terrain paint all the way around, duplicating and advance moving everything all the way along so that we end up with this nice uniform area of foliage and vegetable patches. We also put in, of course, a really nice, I think I was really happy with how this one turned out actually. It was a grapevine that kind of wraps around the circular prefabs of conservation pack items, the wood pieces that are slightly curved. So I used them in a nice creative way and then created the most simple shed for the peafowl to go in. I'll probably come back and modify that off camera at a later date, but I wanted to get this one finished. So yeah, we're just going to make sure that everything's got a little bit of rotation on it so that it doesn't look too samey. Obviously everything grows differently and at different angles and things like that, so I want to try and recreate that as best I can, while at the same time making sure that this build isn't overly complex and is just a series of duplications with some slight rotations thrown in so that it doesn't look too samey throughout. And this was something that I really wanted to create. The new conservation pack obviously gives us a lot of opportunity to develop and expand on backstage areas and things. And it's been really nice to see those things coming forward. And I think like a backstage pack with no animals or anything like that and just a whole load of new assets for us to play with would be a fantastic idea. Obviously, there's a few other bits and pieces we can do here. You'll see in the finished tour that I've not actually put in like any signage or anything. That's all going to happen off camera. But I may actually design a proper entrance for this rather than it just being open. And for some reason, guests haven't come up here yet. I don't know if it's because it's this brand new area that we're just kind of moving into, or I've messed up a path somewhere. I have no idea. Anyway, the carrots was pretty easy to actually just maneuver these so that a couple was sticking out of the ground a little bit more than others and things like that. Just a nice little expansion to the height of different parts of it, because obviously the carrots, the way they grow, you only get the carrot tops. So it's quite difficult to make them look completely like different to all of the other ones. And the carrot field here is going to be massive, so I wanted to really push that one right the way across and have this covering the most of the land space here. I just thought it would be a nice touch. Obviously we're going to have like the carrots will probably be growing a little bit easier here, so we'll probably do more of them. I could also put in like a little farm shop or something. I think that would be a nice idea. But there's a lot that we can play with, and I spent a lot of time going through all of the bush options and foliage options that we could have in to resemble wheat, and there you see the common reeds that we do eventually fall back on to use. It's a shame that we don't have anything that resembles wheat a little bit more, because it would be nice to have this big golden field of wheat there, and I could even, I don't know, I'd thought about designing a plow or a tractor or something to put in here. At the end, though, I didn't do that because, again, I wanted to stay away from something overly complex for this one. It really is just a selection of... it's like when you put a base coat on your canvas, basically. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just background fluff for the build itself. So I wanted it to look good, but I also didn't want it to be too detailed because it's not part of a habitat and it's not part of a guest area, really. So it was just to kind of frame the rest of the farm. And this is one of my build tips that I will talk about is you don't have to be massively detailed on everything. Think about where your eyes are going to be drawn to more when you're building, and it is going to be the high foot traffic areas of your zoo. So bits like this that are just background material, you don't need to go over the top on them. And actually, if you're playing on a slightly older system, you're going to save yourself a lot of processing power if you do just make these simple background pieces rather than something overly complex throughout. One thing I have noticed at the moment in Saltwell is the load is starting to come a little bit, and I may need to put a guest cap on there. I've already done it with Northlands, because that's an incredibly detailed zoo, and it started to have an effect. And I have a pretty powerful system, so that was a little bit difficult, and we've had to put a guest cap on over in Northlands, and I'll probably have to do the same here because I want to keep being able to build detailed projects, but not to the point where the system can't take it anymore and I have to abandon the zoo. We're going to put a fence around this now, and it does end up getting extended. It's a little bit short, especially when I finally bring in the Indian peafowl and they can just simply jump over it. I wanted to create like a combination of metal and wood for the fence, and I had thought, traditionally a lot of farms here in England, they have kind of like a combination of wood and natural barriers. So they will have kind of like a wooden mesh combination for a fence, and then allow like not bracken bushes, but basically they'll allow big thick bushes to grow up and around that and kind of create a natural frame that is supported by the fence itself. So I thought about creating something like that, and I may do that at a later date, but for now I just wanted to use some basic bits and pieces. I couldn't find an appropriate metal post to use as a finisher, so I ended up with wood instead, and I still think this looks really good. You got two nice contrasting colours of wood, and it was really simple to just move it all across. Another thing, I'm building pretty much on the world axis here, and it has made my life so much easier. I don't know what's gone wrong over at the other franchise mode, but it's not great in terms of building. Everything kind of goes a little bit skew-whiff, and it's not great. Pumpkin patches here. When you see pumpkins in their like usual growing environment, they have a lot of like leafy material around them because they grow on this large leaf, and then the pumpkin itself drops off and detaches itself. And obviously our pumpkins here don't have that, so we needed to create something. And what I tried doing was making like a three-way kind of pumpkin growth here. That it didn't really work. You've just seen the leaves that we end up using, and what we end up doing is sinking them into the ground a little bit and then resting the pumpkin on top, so it still looks like it's had that little bit of growth. And I don't want to just plonk these things down into the build, because I still want that little bit of detail and that little nod to the fact that these things have grown here. They haven't just been dropped into the field. They've not been harvested yet, and yeah, I think it's important to have that differentiation, because obviously these pumpkins are just meant to be displayed. We don't want them displayed here, we want them to be part of a growing working farm. So I tried with the nettles, and I kind of liked that, but they weren't big enough. The leaves on them weren't big enough. I don't actually have a reference to bring up here, but we end up using the bird's nest fern and then just dropping a pumpkin in. Now there is a little bit of clipping, it doesn't look amazing, but it gets the effect that we want from it, and I think that's good enough. Pumpkin patch ends up being a fairly sizable one because the pumpkins themselves are pretty big. We just sink it into the ground a little bit. Now the mulch doesn't look amazing sunk into the ground like that, but once we do the terrain painting, it's not as bad as it originally looks. And I just want to... The mulch I really like as a signifier for the fact that this is like freshly tilled earth, or it's a good high quality soil that's been put down there. And then we paint around it with the standard soil terrain brushes that are available with the game itself. Now, this is where things get a little bit more in depth. This actually ends up being the Peafowl Habitat. I just thought, why not? We need something... another animal here to draw a little bit more of a crowd, because we haven't had any guests come up here, as I've already mentioned, and I wanted to make sure that I used this space a little bit differently rather than just having 2 separate farm plots all the way through. But this walkway is going to be a grapevine walkway that is going to run up. Now, I had a little look at how grapes are actually grown, because these grapevines look like they're meant to be up against the side of a building. And originally I thought we'll just do this naturally curving vine of grapes that's like a walkway for people. So I think that looks too two-dimensional when I look at it. So it needed something to support it and also give it a little bit more depth rather than just this flash of greenery that's sprouting up from nowhere. And that's where the new conservation curved pieces came in. So you can see here we're trying to create that curve naturally. It doesn't work out. I tried with some classic pieces to try and make just a nice archway. I did see a few bits and pieces there, but none of them were suitable. We've moved away from the classical architecture of the entrance to this zoo anyway, so it seemed a little bit inappropriate to be continuing that theme here as well. These pieces could have been good, but they were far too big, so we didn't end up using them. And it's just that process of getting the piece that's perfect for what you're trying to build. I was going to use the conservation pack pieces and try and make something myself, and then I found this. This is perfect. It's exactly what I want. We just need to remove these residual pieces, get rid of them. So we've just been left with the wooden curved archways. And then we're going to attach our grapevines to it. And I think these conservation pieces that we've been given, the build tools, all of that sort of stuff that we've got at our disposal, I think it's just some of the best work that they've put out. Every time they bring out a new DLC, they do something that enhances the game, enhances the building experience, and enhances the tools that you have as a builder at your disposal. And I mean, look at it already. This looks great. This works really well. You could see and imagine someone coming in here with a ladder and just picking those grapes off the side and letting those grapes grow all the way around to the curve, where we leave a little gap at the top because I didn't really want them to meet. But you've got this really nice contrast of this the vines kind of growing through this woodwork, and you can see that the wood supports those grape trees as they grow up and through. And you've got lovely little flashes where it's just poking through. We took some of the thicker branches as well and applied them to it a little bit further up, just so we had a little bit more of like an overgrowth in there. And everything quite happily matched without it looking too floaty or like something wasn't quite right. And it was just a case of making sure that the stems and the trunks for these grapevines matched nicely. It doesn't have to be too perfect, but it does need to look like it is meant to have kind of grown all the way up there with the aid of those wooden beams. And this is us just putting some of the thicker pieces in, just getting them all set up nicely and kind of matching up the stalks or the stems or the trunks of those grapevines. And then we duplicate it because it's a little bit too short, and we just move the whole thing up a little bit more to create this nice walkway. And then we're going to run a path through there into the Peafowl Habitat so that guests can come in and do a little loop around. And we could even put in a little kiosk of some description that's like a fake farm food shop of some like description, kind of where that pumpkin patch is, because that becomes a little bit of dead space. I did put in some fig trees as well. Now, carrying on those conservation wooden plank pieces, I wanted to create a little shed for our peafowl to come into. And this was really simple. Like, I'm not entirely happy with this one, and it probably will change, but I just wanted something basic, not too well decorated, and I ended up using some glass pieces and then sunk these conservation pack wooden pieces right into it, so you have this nice little combination of glass that you can just about see through, and then these nice wooden beams creating this shed-like structure. It's all glass on the roof, there's nothing else interfering with that, there's no wood or anything being added to the top of it, although I may change that as well. There's a lot that I could change here and I could do with sprucing the whole thing up, but it was just something quick. The peafowl thing was a very last minute decision on my part. I wasn't originally going to bring them in. This was all just going to be farmland. And then I thought, why don't we put the peafowl in here as like a walk-in habitat? Because actually where they were, it was a really cramped area. And the foot traffic was insane there. So it kind of made everything a little bit too stacked up right at the entrance to that zoo. Especially considering guests would walk through it to get to some food and drink vendors. So that needed to change. And again, it's a further development of this zoo. I remember way back when we started this one, because obviously the first episode in this franchise mode series is still pretty popular. And when I think back to those first few episodes and how far everything has kind of come in this zoo in particular, but also my journey as a builder in Planet Zoo and how that's all changed and everything, it's crazy that was about a year and a half ago. Anyway, we're just slapping down a load of enrichment items for our peafowl, and then we're going to put in... I tried messing around with a habitat gate, but actually, in the finished build, I didn't need one at all. The peafowl can't escape for some strange reason, and I made like an open gate coming into this area. Again, could do with putting a little bit of detail on that, and I probably will at some point. But the open gate, obviously, guests are going to clip through it as they come in. So we'll just have to cope with that. But I thought it looked pretty good. We had a couple of issues, though, with the gate. Even though it's been placed there, it's not actually accessible at all. So that does end up moving up to the far side where the path curves. And then this is where we were originally trying to put our walk-through entrance. And we don't actually need it at all, so it gets completely abandoned. We're just tightening up our barriers. And then obviously when I get the peafowl in, it turns out they can leap that fence with absolutely no issues at all. So the fences do get extended height-wise to twice the height, and that was done just by duplicating the entire fence because that was left as a separate piece. Putting in our bark chipping path now. Just moving this all the way around. I wanted to have something that had like a little bit of a loop. It was a bit difficult to get this one working, but I think I'm happy with the eventual outcome. It looks how I want it to look. It gives you a nice little loop around, and then you join back up with the main path and come back in to the main area of the zoo. There's a couple of other bits and pieces we can finish off around here that I'm going to do off camera, mainly the entrance area where there's a couple of like flat pieces. Another thing that I've started doing is using the decal pieces to make like soil overhang on some of my pathways. It just really helps to integrate the paths with the environment rather than having them look like these solid pieces. You end up with a really nice natural looking path. We're just flying through and putting in a load of coverage from these meadow pieces from the conservation pack. So like the poppies, the daisies, the tickseed and other bits and pieces. I wanted this to be a really thick meadow because the peafowl can cope with it, and they also don't need... They basically have no requirements in terms of the amount of coverage you can have from foliage and stuff. So we threw a load down, put in a load of rocks at various locations throughout, and then that's about it really. Did a little bit of terrain painting just to finish everything off and get everything looking solid and not like this one-dimensional flat colour. A couple of long blades of grass in there just to make a nice little bit of contrast for our actual flowers that are put down. And then we put in a few bits and pieces for backstage areas. So a couple of these insect hides, which I think fit perfectly in this habitat. We've got one in one place and then 3 over here by these fig trees here. I thought fig trees would be good because, again, it's another harvestable thing and works well with our farm. A couple of shovels and rakes and stuff going down here as if they've just been left by people who were doing some farming. A nice big water trough here. And other bits and pieces. Like, I love these backstage area props. They've done a really good job of bringing these in. We're going to fill this, what's it called? Wheelbarrow, that's the one, with tools, and just put them in a few different rotations so it looks like they've kind of just been brought here, ready to be used. A couple of buckets in this area here, going in the little trailer, and then some crates as we are ready to harvest our tomatoes. our cabbages and our carrots. Got a rake down in there as well. And it's all of this just tiny little detailing work. And you could be doing a lot more. But again, like I said, this isn't actually going to be a huge habitat that's part of something. It's just background. And that's what's important when you're building. You just need to be aware of what is background, what's going to draw the eye, what's part of a habitat. And that's probably my lesson for today. Don't go too much all the time. You don't need to. Little goes a long way in terms of like backgrounds for habitats. And I think that's a really key thing. So I put down a few cardboard boxes, filled them with rope for some unknown reason. I just thought that would be a cool thing to do. For the sake of like a 2-minute job, it just kind of changes things a little bit. And we are just about ready for our little tour of this one. I hope you enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun making it. And it's looking great. I mean, look at this. It's exactly what I wanted it to look like. You've got the farm in the background, which is the Przewalski horse and the llama habitat. You've got this lovely grape orchard walk-through coming right up to our nice little farm area here. And this, it kind of does look like wheat. It's hitting home, and the height differentials are really cool on it. Our tomato plants, which is where it all began. I think they look really cool. It's definitely got a nice feel to it. This is the Peafowl Habitat. And it's really lush and really overgrown, and I love that about it. There's plenty of space for them, and they've not yet escaped, so, you know, happy days. Over here, the little insect hides, and then right across there you've got our Przewalski's horse and llama barn. I've now combined those into one habitat. They seem to be living together without any issues, so that's absolutely fine. Over here, the pumpkin patch, with the background area, pieces, and lots of other different bits in there. I really like this a lot. It's so simple, but I think it's quite effective, and it just really helps to finish off this area. We could do with some signage and stuff, like I said, and we've not put any education boards in for the peafowl yet, so they will follow, and hopefully we'll start seeing the guests coming around to this area as well. Over at our cabbage patch, again, there's nothing to it really. It's just multiple pieces duplicated over and over again to create this scene. Still waiting for people to come into this building though. And we're just going to have a little swing around to see. This used to be where the llamas were solely based, but now you can see right through into that barn there. The wall that divided the two habitats is now gone, and the animals can roam freely between both paddocks. And I think that's just worked out really well. You can see the llamas in the other side. They just seem to have switched sides. But there's a lot more space for them to roam in. Actually, the change has not affected them in any way. I've not needed to make any changes to the habitat at all. So, as the sun rises on another new day at this farm, somebody should name the farm, I guess. I don't have any creative ideas. If you've watched this far and you want to name the farm, stick your suggestions down in the comments, and I will create a sign off camera, and we'll christen it on our next episode of Saltwell Safari Park. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed making it. It was a fun little build. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you for the next one. Goodbye.